Thank you
very
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, just some logistics. If you scan the QR code, you can get live transcription and translation. So I'll give you a few minutes to that. But just to tell you a little bit more about myself, so I've been at Amazon for almost 11 years. When I started, it was kind of early days on the cloud. I've worked in education, so with higher ed institutions, and mostly in the US, with EdTechs, with publishers, with K-12 schools. And the conversation when I started was, what is this cloud thing? Is it secure? Maybe we'll move some dev test stuff over. And it's really evolved to now we're seeing both these higher institutions and EdTechs, either a lot of the EdTechs are just built in the cloud, and a lot of the higher eds are building new things in the cloud and moving their mission critical systems over. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is, let's see here, we're just going to... Let's get started. Can we switch over to the other? Yeah. Oh, good. All right, there we go. So what we're going to talk about today is what I'm seeing our higher ed and ed tech customers do with generative AI. So we'll talk about. Oh, I think we're on the wrong slides here. It's all the way at the end. So while they're fixing that, let me tell you what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about, I'm going to just level set and talk to you about what generative AI is, how we define it. And then we're going to talk about use cases I'm seeing in higher ed for generative AI. And then we'll talk about how you can unlock the potential of foundational models and generative AI, and also some of the risks, limitations, and how to think about responsible AI. And I think we're like all the way at the end here. So while they're sorting that out, and then we're going to talk about how you get started. What do you do next? So I'm just going to pause for a second until we get to the right slide here. Yeah. There's always, oh, there we go. Now we're at the beginning. So while we're doing that, let me tell you a story about when I first started at Amazon. I went to EDUCAUSE, which is a big conference, in the U.S. for all of our educational customers. And I remember at the time, nobody knew what AWS was. They didn't know what the cloud was. This was 2013, and people kept walking up to me in our little booth. It didn't say AWS, it said Amazon, and everybody was asking me "Hey, can you help me with my Kindle?" My Amazon order didn't arrive on time, and actually, for that kind of thing, I've been on flights and start chatting with people, telling them about my work, and they start telling me about, how they had some Amazon order that didn't really work. And so we actually have a system internally where I can go in, and I was on a flight once, and they told me their Amazon order didn't arrive, and I went back and I asked them what their name was, and I put it into our system on the plane Wi-Fi, and by the time they landed, their order was all sorted out, and they were really impressed. Anyway, it looks like we're on, now we got this sorted out. So let's talk about an introduction to generative AI first. So it's important to note that at its core, what generative AI is it's leveraging the latest advances in learning, but it's not magic. It's just the latest evolution in the technology, which is machine learning, that's been evolving for years. What makes foundational models, which are kind of at the core of generative AI, special is that they can perform many more tasks because they contain a large number of parameters, and they're capable of learning really complex concepts. Through their pre-trained, so the foundational models, they're trained on internet scale data in various forms and patterns. So for example, ChatGPT is basically generated a snapshot of all the data on the internet that they had access to, some period of time ago. And so they apply their knowledge within a wide range of concepts. So if you've ever used something like ChatGPT or Midjourney or Stable Diffusion, you can kind of tell it's very open-ended, right? And I like to think of those kind of generative AI foundational models as really, really fancy autocomplete, right? And so while the capabilities and possibilities of these pre-trained foundational models are amazing, I think when I talk to customers, they get really excited about being able to perform domain-specific functions for their specific businesses or educational institutions. So I'll talk about specific use cases I see in education, but it's really expensive to build a foundational model from scratch, right? So if you're building a foundational model like what ChatGPT uses or some of these other models out there, you need a lot of GPUs, and they can be expensive. And also on top of that, there's a giant supply chain issue with GPUs right now. So even getting access to them is difficult. And from environmental perspective, training a foundational model just also use a lot of power, a lot of cooling from these GPUs. So if you can reduce that, if you can just take an existing one and then fine tune it with your data, there's a lot of advantages to that. And the customers I talk to are super excited about that. So let's talk about the different types of foundational models. This top one here, the text-to-text, that's the one most people are familiar with. So, for example, things like summarization of texts, extracting information, responding to questions, creating content. So this is what I mean when I say like it's really fancy autocomplete. So these models take your input and they extend it to new generated text. And it's really important. We're seeing like people who are prompt engineering, right? So you basically learn how to give it the input it needs to get the output that you want. Then there's another type of LLM, and when I say LLM, I mean large language model, that can compare pieces of text, like what a user types into a search bar, and then connect the dots between the search bar and index data that they have. So for example, when you go search for a product on Amazon.com, it uses this type of LM to compare what you're asking it with data in our catalog, and then it presents you with more accurate and relevant search results. Lastly, there's these multimodal foundational models that can understand text and images. So an example is Stable Diffusion. So you can give Stable Diffusion text, and it'll generate an image off that text. A lot of these models, so you can actually give them an image, and it'll describe that image in text for you. Or you can give it an image and tell it, so you can upload like the Mona Lisa and say, expand this image to twice the size. So what would the edges of it look like if it was expanded? And it does a pretty good job of it. And some of them can do videos, not just images, all kinds of interesting use cases there. So what are some applications that we're seeing? I think the potential for generative AI is really exciting, and there's a forecast $7 trillion increase in the global GDP over the next 10 years, according to Goldman Sachs, from generative AI. And we've seen over the years of many fast-moving technologies, the evolution of, and in the evolution of machine learning, things rapidly change. So, for example, like a year ago, almost nobody was talking about generative AI. 6 months ago, all the kind of chatter was about things like ChatGPT, and things are going to continue evolving. We're going to see new architectures rise in the future, and this diversity of foundational models, I think, is going to set off a lot of innovation, and that's going to change the way that we interact with customers, if we're companies, with students, with employees. So if we think about things like AI virtual assistants, those are going to be much easier to set up. We're already seeing things like GitHub Copilot, or we have a service called Amazon Code Whisperer, and that helps programmers generate code. So they still need to know how to program, they still need to understand what they're writing, but basically what those tools allow you to do is you can write a comment in your code saying, generate a function that takes these parameters and gives me this output. And it'll generate complete code for you to do that. and you can look at it and accept it or reject it or regenerate a new suggestion. So it's not going to get you all the way there, but it'll save you a lot of time. And we're seeing developers both internally at Amazon and with our customers already take advantage of this. And one of our customers, they said that they've noticed that there's a 57% faster task completion from adopting our code completion service. We're also going to see a lot of advances in using this to make informed decisions. So things like getting, instead of reading a 20-page report, I can get an automatic summary, and I can still go back to the report if I need to, but it saves me a lot of time. Creating new content and ideas. And I think an important part here is it's not, generative AI isn't going to create a whole script for you, you still need a human input to tell it what to do, but it'll just give you a starting point and save you a lot of time. So just to go back a little bit, in terms of machine learning, which is the foundation of all this, machine learning has been a focus at Amazon for over 20 years, and many of the capabilities that our customers use with our services are driven by machine learning. Our e-commerce recommendations engine, so when you go on Amazon.com and it tells you, hey, you're looking at this, maybe these are some relevant other products that you want to take a look at, that's driven by ML. Our supply chain forecasting and capacity planning are informed by machine learning. Prime Air, which is our drone delivery service, and the computer vision technology in Amazon Go. I checked, I don't think there's any Amazon Go stores here in Ireland yet, but it's the store where it's a little convenience store like a 7-Eleven. You walk in, you scan in with your QR code that's tied to your Amazon account, you walk out, and then there's no cashier. You just, the first time you do it, it feels like you're shoplifting, but you're not. So you walk out, and a few minutes later on your Amazon app, you got a receipt for all the stuff you walked out with. And so that's powered by deep learning. And Alexa is powered by more than 30 different machine learning systems. And it helps customers, for example, billions of times a week manage their smart homes, shop, get information, get access to entertainment, and more. So we've been doing this for a long time. And we've been working on democratizing machine learning. So it used to be that you needed a whole data science team, or it was a very specialized sort of thing. And we've been working on building services that make it accessible to anybody who wants to use it. So we have over 100,000 customers of all sizes and industries. We've got a really deep portfolio of AI ML services, and we're invested at kind of meeting our customers where they're at. So some of our customers, they're going to want to train their own models from scratch. So we have, the hardware for them to do that. Other customers, they want access to data science platforms so they can tweak things. We have services that do that as well. And then we've got a service that we released last week that really, it's just a generative AI service that lets you play around with it and tweak your own models and tune your own data, and it's really simple to use. So we've got customers like Intuit, Thomson Reuters, Ferrari, 3M, BMW, as well as thousands of startups, government agencies, educational institutions around the world that are already transforming themselves. And what I'm seeing in education too is that we're really in the discovery phase. So I work with a lot of the Ivy League universities in the US, and they're all, at first 6 months ago, some of them were kind of worried, and I'll talk about the risks of generative AI in a second, but a lot of them are also now excited. They're like, how can we use this to enhance the experience for our students, for learners, for staff? How can we optimize things? So they're all looking for use cases and doing proofs of concepts now. And a lot of the tech companies I work with, they're looking at their functionality of their tech. So if they're doing study aids or working on improving student outcomes, they're thinking, how can we further our mission with generative AI? And so just some specific use cases I've seen. One area is search and discovery. So recommending learning content to a student who's taking an online course, or to improve large repositories for content. That's somewhere where let's say I don't have to learn the query language, right, of a search engine. I can use natural language to discover my content. And you can also point a, a, a foundational model at your data and then fine tune your data on top of it, right? That's a common pattern here. Another one I've seen is just for administration, so intelligent document processing. So let's say you've got a form that a student has to fill out, and it's a and then yes, we still have a lot of paper forms at various educational institutions, and let's say this form, it's got 10 pages. Each page is different. You can use generative AI for things like summarizing the content. You can classify the content, so you can get you can see what each page is. You can then have a chatbot that you can interact with to get information on that form. So let's say the form, it's a form to register for classes. You can ask it, this student, what classes did they register for on Wednesday? Right, and it'll answer the question, and it's based on not like internet scale data, but that form, the data in that form. Another one I've seen is contact centers. So let's say you've got a conversation in an online tutoring session, and then you get a transcript of that tutoring session, and then you can go do analytics on it. So you can look at that transcript and you can ask it, did the student get all their questions answered? Did they explore this concept or that concept? And so I think that's kind of a powerful use case as well. We're seeing it also in call centers. So again, you can examine call recordings and see if they're effective, if there's ways you can improve. Also content creation. So summarizing content. I know like internally already, there's some reports that like I'm on meetings where we have to read a bunch of documents, and we're already using generative AI to get summaries of those documents. So I can, instead of, it's reduced the amount of reading I have to do. And then if I want to go back to the original report, I still can, but it's really starting to save time for me. Metadata. So looking at things like, let's say you have an online class that's streamed online, and you want to generate metadata on it. You can take the video of that online class, and you can use generative AI to generate all that metadata automatically, right? And then integrate that into other systems. I'll show you a demo in a second of something like that. Also, self-service use cases. So let's say a student needs help registering for classes. In the US, that means they typically have to call a phone number, talk to a human, wait on hold for a bunch of time. So what if they could just interact with a chatbot and immediately get, if students, they don't want to really talk to a real person for that kind of use case anyway. So what if they can just tell a chatbot exactly what they want, and it can help them, and 90% of the time they don't have to go beyond that. And then 10% of the time they can go talk to a human being, and it cuts down on hold times because less people are calling the call center. Also, learning outcomes. So a lot of the EdTechs I'm working with, they do things like, how can we, if we're doing study aids or tutoring sessions for a lot of basic use cases, can we just have a chatbot powered by generative AI to do that? Maybe, right? They're all exploring it now. And or how do you identify, students who are struggling in a class based on the data you have, right? That's another potential use case. So let's take a look at a demo here. So let's see if this video works. If not, I can just tell you what's going on here. Yeah, it doesn't look like the video is playing. That's okay. So this is a video of one of our online things we put on YouTube. And this specific one is it's a little session about Code Whisper, which is again our code generation service. And so it's about a 20-minute video, and we're interviewing the person that's in charge of the service, and they're talking about the capabilities of the service. And so let's imagine instead you have, again, this is a streamed online class. So what we're doing here in this demo is we got the video file. We're going to generate the transcript from the video. That's nothing new. You could do that before. What's really cool is after I have that transcript, I can then create a summary of the video, but not just a generic summary. I can tell it, for example, give me a highlight of the or give me a summary of this video, but only focused on the programming languages that CodeWhisper supports. So in the actual full demo, what you see in there is it actually generates a summary and it's customized. It just focuses on that aspect of the video. So imagine if any student could do that, if they had access to a bunch of online lecture materials and they can get summaries that are customized to whatever it is that they're trying to focus on. I think that's pretty cool. And again, this is all done through a web portal, so it doesn't require somebody to be really technical to use this at all. Some other, I was talking to a bunch of our solutions architects who work with our education customers, and we've got a bunch of demos that they're working on based on the needs they're seeing. So these are some examples here. So the one over here, this is an online tutoring session. So, or actually this one. So it's a chatbot. It's based off of the curriculum for a history class that you've got, and you can go just ask it questions like, what were the key events of the American Civil War? Not only does it give you the answer, but it also gives you the sources, so it didn't make it up, right? You know what sources it came from, which is really cool. And this is something that one of our solutions architects probably set up in a few hours. It didn't take a long time. This one over here, that is test generation questions. So we have like internal training all the time, to catch up with a new service that came out or to refresh our employees. And we have quizzes in those trainings. And usually, like if I already know this, I don't have to sit through the whole training. I can just test out of it. But those test questions are all manually generated typically, right? So I've created trainings before for our employees, and I have to then think of a bunch of test questions. Well, what if you could just generate test questions based off of the content that you already have? So this is a test question that's been automatically generated. That's another use case that I've seen. It's really cool. And the one on the bottom here, so this is support line summarization. So let's say you've got a phone line. Again, you get an automatic summary of the call. That's cool. But then on top of that, you can automatically get the sentiment of the call. So you can see, was the caller angry? Were they content? And then you can see what was the conclusion of the call. So it can figure out what was the problem that the caller was calling about, and did their problem get fixed, right? So you can use that for all kinds of things. So those are some common use cases. Let's talk about what's next. I think, again, earlier on, there's a lot of excitement about these generic models like ChatGPT, but I think what we're going to see is we're going to see purpose-built large language models that are tuned on the data of the education institution, the tech company, and that allow them, from a security perspective, they know exactly what this is trained on, right? So they know there's less chance that it's going to hallucinate or make up something in the answers. There's also a reduction of risk for IP issues. So in the US, for example, a comedian, Sarah Silverman, she's suing OpenAI, which makes ChatGPT, because she says that it was trained on her content and it's ripping off her jokes, right? Which is potentially a valid concern. So if you're training it on content that you have the rights to, you're eliminating that risk, right? So I think we're going to see a lot more of specifically trained LLMs on specific sets of data, and it's going to, what I say when I mean, it can remove undifferentiated heavy lifting. There will be access to services, such as ones that we've already announced, where you can do this and not be super technical, not have to have access to a ton of GPUs, not have to do a lot of system administration, any of this just administrative stuff that isn't the value of what you're doing. I think we're going to see a lot of more of automation of summarization, basic tutoring, entry-level tutoring, image creation, creating these questions. And I think it's not going to take away people's jobs. It's going to allow people to scale, right? So it'll make it so that when you first interact with the system, it's probably a bot, but then at some point, you're going to exceed its capabilities and you're going to have to talk to a real person. And so when you do talk to the real person, you're actually asking them difficult questions, right, that they're qualified to answer. And for developers, I think that this is already happening. I think of generative AI as a reserve brain. So we already, developers, what they do now is they'll use search engines, they use sites like Stack Overflow to get code samples, And so it's just going to make that all easier, right? So if you're writing code, you can use it. You can use this to generate code snippets for you. You can also use it to explain code. So let's say I'm like a new developer at my new job, and I have to understand the code base that I'm working on. And so if I'm working at a tech company, if I can just drop a piece of code in, an existing code, and have it explain it to me, that's cool. That's gonna speed up the amount of time, and I can get to work a lot quicker and be more efficient. Also, the ability to search, combine like different types of documentation, wiki, knowledge bases, APIs. So if I can ask a foundational model that's been fine tuned and all that, hey, how do I do this? So let's say I'm using, I'm trying to write an app for Canvas for instructor for that LMS. And I can just ask it a question, hey, how do I add this functionality and do this a very specific question? And they'll answer it based on the knowledge of all these underlying systems for me. So I think this is already all happening. And so I think also being able to query all your data with natural language. So let's say you're your university and you have a data warehouse with all kinds of data on class registration, student retention, all that kind of thing. Let's say you put an LLM in front of it, so you can then query that data without having to know SQL or without being a database administrator or an expert at it. I think that's going to be really cool. Now, we talked about the upsides. Let's talk about some of the risks. Because, specifically we deal with a lot of government agencies, with educational institutions. They have a really high bar to reduce risks and to address the limitations of generative AI, right? And so some of the risks here are as follows, right? And we define a responsible AI as being made up of 6 dimensions. So bias and fairness, explainability, robustness, privacy and security, governance, and transparency. So this is our definition today, but I think it's going to keep evolving. This is a rapidly evolving area. And so just deep dive on some of these. So bias and fairness. So how do we consider how a system impacts different subpopulations of users? So we want to make sure that there aren't harmful disparities in performance across these populations. Explainability. So how a system offers a rationale for its decisions. So especially like government customers, education customers, they want the answers that a generative AI system gives them to be explainable, so they can understand how did it arrive at that answer, at that conclusion. Privacy and security, this is in general our highest priority at AWS. So how do you make sure that what you're doing, if you don't want it to, it's not being shared? So your input into the generative AI model, right? How do you make sure that that's not being used to train the model or steal your IP or steal your data or repurpose it without your knowledge? I think that's like probably the biggest concern. And so when we're setting up these systems, in fact, like our new generative AI service that we announced last week, it's all built so there's a walled garden around your data. And you're not going back to the central model that everybody's using. You pick what model you want to use, and then you get your own copy of it, and then you add your data on top of it, and you fine tune it, and it's all within your specific account in AWS, and it's locked down, right? So it's designed that way from scratch. So again, this is, I think, the biggest issue here. And then governance. So once you've defined, okay, these are going to be the standards of security. How do we enforce that? How do we make sure that anybody in our organization who uses these services actually checks all the right boxes and make sure that they're following these practices? So again, this is another thing that we think about at the beginning when we build these services. And also transparency. So when users are interacting with systems where they're generated by machine learning, how do they know that that's in fact going on? So our commitment is to develop AI and machine learning in a responsible way. And we have a bunch of scientists working on it. we're focused on helping our customers also answer these questions. A lot of the stuff is not how we do it, but how our customers set this up. And I'm going to go a little bit quicker here. We're also participating in a lot of regulatory efforts. So there's a lot of these efforts going on around the world, and our public policy team's involved. We're involved in a bunch of regulatory bodies that do this. And we've also released a machine learning course so you can take this. There's about 9 hours of free content available. And this is created by the same scientists that train our AWS employees on machine learning. All right, so I'm going to skip ahead because I think I'm running out of time here. So, yes, I've run out of time. So let me go to what's next. I had a lot of content here. But I think we had some technical difficulties here. So let me tell you what's next here. Hold on. There we go. So let's take a look at. I think we're one slide behind, but there's an AI use case explorer. So if you want to see working demos, we have this AI use case explorer. If you go to aiexplorer.aws.amazon.com, and it's a tool with curated AI use cases for your organization, and you can discover how organizations around the world are using generative AI. And then after that, I would say the other thing is we have an accelerator that we're launching. It's an EdTech accelerator, and I think we've already talked about it here today, but the winner of the demo day of this accelerator makes $100,000 in AWS credits. So sorry, I've run out of time, but thank you so much, and I'll be around. So if you want to ask me any questions afterwards, let me know.
Before you leave, one question from the audience. Can you explain what an LLM is in straightforward language?
Yes. So an LLM, it's a large language model. So ChatGPT is an LLM. There's a bunch of different ones, and they're all trained on different sets of data. And then, so when you interact with it, it basically, previously you would have, in regular machine learning, you have labeled data. So you have specific, so for example, if you're training a machine at the airport on picking up like what's in your suitcase, right? You would just train on pictures of things in suitcases and it would learn. An LLM, it's unlabeled data. So you put in massive amounts of data and you train it with these GPU chips, and then it enables it to make connections in ways that regular machine learning can't. And that's why you can ask it these complicated questions and it'll know how to make connections in your data. So essentially, the question is, when you're using an LLM, be aware of like what the data is trained on, whether your inputs are being used to then retrain the model, and make informed decisions.
Yes, what the corpus is, where it all comes from.
Exactly, yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much.
You.
Thank you very much. Can we thank Leo again?